Hey guys, welcome to the DarshanTalks recording and podcast. On this podcast, we discuss life science, legal, and regulatory issues, especially in the context of medical affairs, clinical research, and promotional compliance. If you like these videos and podcasts, please like, leave a comment, and subscribe. You know you want to. This video and podcast is brought to you by the Kulkarni Law Firm. Reach out to the Kulkarni Law Firm for advice on PRC review, MRC review, developing SOPs, training, audit compliance, and more. Reach out to Darshan at kulkarnilawfirm.com or call me at 302-252-6959. Or you can just visit our website at DarshanTalks.com or visit the law firm website at kulkarnilawfirm.com. That's KULKARNI lawfirm.com. Hey guys, today's interview is going to be really great. I'm really excited because we get to have someone with us who is an expert in networking. She's the co-founder of Talent Strategy Partners and Silo Busting Networking. She's a lifelong networker and works with executives to help them build their skills in creating cultures where internal networking is a natural way to work and work gets done. So our guest for today, Pat Schaeffer. Hey, Pat, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine, Darshan. Thanks for inviting me to be with you.
Thank you for coming on. This is really exciting because now is this change in environment where everyone's now going, are we going back to work? How does work look like in a time when I used to just work from home? Is networking as important now in person, or have the strategies changed? And everyone's starting to work. We worked in these internal micro silos, I'm calling them the second, as in you alone in your pod at home, to silos within your company, to silos across your company, to silos within groups like yours. So if you are in sales, all you're hanging out with are salespeople. So talk to me a little bit about how has networking changed in the post-pandemic?
I think it's gotten harder to network, and I think that remote working has created yet another silo because people are removed from their coworkers, from their managers. So I think that it's just become harder and harder to network. But I think that makes it all the more important as people do return to the office, and hopefully everybody will return in some fashion, even if they're only there a day a week. So that they can make those in-person connections. Because what I've discovered throughout COVID in just interacting with people on Zoom is it's just not the same as being in person. Yeah, you make connections, but they're just not as solid. They're not as human, if you will, as those that you make when you're actually face-to-face with someone.
Which is really interesting, right? I just read today, I think this was the New York Times or something, where I think it was LinkedIn actually. The rise of quiet quitting. Did you read this?
No, I haven't seen it.
Okay, so quiet quitting apparently, and I've never heard this term until this morning. Apparently, that is when people go, it's 5 o'clock, I'm going to stop working. You start establishing those boundaries so that you work more efficiently. My question is, as we start moving into the offices, like you said, so that you create that human connection, are the boundaries too blurred at this moment? Is networking optimized when you start creating these boundaries between work life and home life? And how does that all play together?
Yeah, it makes it very difficult, doesn't it? One of the things that working at home did is that people didn't have a boundary. They would work all the time. They felt like they were on call all the time. I even heard one person say, a manager say, people were reluctant to call her because she was at home and they were afraid they were invading her privacy. So I think it's really made things awkward for people. This sort of lack of boundary between working and your home life. And when you're in an office, you can cut that off. You can start it at a certain time. You can finish it at a certain time. And people understand that and they don't bother you outside of those hours. But with remote working, that's really changed a lot. On the other hand, I've heard a lot of people talk about the fact that they have much better work-life balance now. that they can stop working, they can go feed the dog, or help the kids with their homework or whatever it might be. So it's really helped them get a better balance, and especially the younger generations are looking for far more work-life balance than us baby boomers ever did.
Which really raises the next question, right? The idea of generational networking. Um, does for to the extent do baby boomers network differently than Gen Z? I think we're on Gen Z. I can't even tell anymore. It's like Gen Alpha
Yeah.
coming, but whatever the latest one is, do we network differently? Is Gen Z going, I like networking via Slack and Zoom and whatever the latest tool is, and I don't need the same in-person networking as, say, a Gen X or a baby boomer who's going, no, I need to have that warm hand-to-hand touch, hand-to-hand connection that builds a different type of networking, a different type of relationship.
Yeah. So I'm not a Gen Zer, and I don't have Gen Zers in my life, so I don't really know. But what I do know from the HR side of things, and recruiting, and what younger employees are looking for in the workplace, is they want everything to be online. So
Right.
they don't value that face-to-face connection that you and I do. The other thing I know, and just from talking, not with Gen Zers, but probably a millennial, is that they look at networking differently. You and I look at networking as, we need to build long-term relationships with people, because that's how you build trust. That's how you get people to refer business to you, to make connections for you, and that kind of thing. So we know how important those long-term relationships are. But with the millennials, it's like, oh, let's go out and have a drink. That's what networking is. We'll exchange business cards and, rah, rah, add you to my LinkedIn profile. They don't really understand that the importance that we do of making those relationships be longer term, because that's really the only way that you're going to get any true benefit from them, other than having a good time.
So that really brings us to that next question, right? Is networking itself changing as I get older, as you get older? Do we become the fuddy-duddies compared to your Gen Z and your maybe the use of this term fuddy-duddy didn't help my cause here, but but being a Gen Z or a millennial, do they not value it because they get that long-term networking in a different way? They bust through those silos in a different way than you and I do.
I don't think so. I think they do it the same way. We just, we're both part of the same membership organization, executive networking organization, Beacon. And we just did a focus group with our younger members, like the 40s, 30, late 30s and 40s, 40-year-olds. And they really value the same networking that we do. The thing is, what they want from their networking is, in addition to making the connections, is they want to learn. They want some opportunity to expand their horizons, and to learn new ways of thinking, or to learn a new skill or something like that. So they see networking much more broadly than I think we ever did. We thought about it as the human interaction. They see it as sort of part of their professional or their career development, professional development, which I find interesting. But the networking piece of it, they seem to buy into exactly the way we do.
Okay. So then, do they organize themselves in silos the same way we do? Do they see silos in the same way? Or, like, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, who is networking a problem for? Is it for everyone? Is it for a certain generation? How does that play itself out?
I think it's for everyone, especially when you talk about internal networking, which is the thing that I've been focused on lately. So versus networking externally to find your next career move or whatever, or find your next client, depending on your particular goal. It's this networking internally inside a company. The lack of networking inside companies really hinders their ability to perform. And what we found is that when you start, and you're not necessarily, I'm not advocating that you tear down, all the walls between sales and marketing and research and development and that kind of thing, but that you make those boundaries more permeable, that people can talk across those boundaries, that people can collaborate when they've got a common goal in mind, that they can collaborate. And what that leads to is greater creativity and greater innovation. The research shows it. So that's really what I advocate, and what I think people are not even thinking about. Because we talk to companies and they say, yeah, we have these silos and we know they're getting in the way, but they've always been there. There's really nothing we can do about them, but there is something that can be done about them. And when you start making those boundaries more permeable, all kinds of great things happen. And one of the things that research finds is that internal networking actually increases employee engagement and increases their willingness to stay with an organization. And in fact, I think it was Personnel Psychology did a study, and they found that these kinds of internal networks actually reduce turnover by 140%.
Because you're buying into the group.
Yeah. You've got a community there, and you're less likely to leave, because then you got to start all over again. You're leaving the security of that group of people that you've made connections with and that you're comfortable with and that you know how to work with.
Which is reminiscent of, go ahead. It's reminiscent of my own experience, because I found that when I used to be a pharmacist, and I remember as I was transitioning over to being more of a lawyer, I'd had decades of experience, decades of networking with other pharmacists, and I almost found myself, and I was working in a hospital, and I was moving over to obviously a more legal scenario. It was really hard for me to let go of my friends who were working in the hospital, and because to me it meant almost losing a part of myself. And I think that's what you're talking about, which is
it's exactly what I'm talking about. Yes.
I guess the question then is, what is the difference between internal networking, as you put it, or versus, say, creating a corporate culture versus drinking the Kool-Aid?
Right. Maybe they're all one and the same, but I think it does require a culture change. Internal networking requires a culture change. In my view, that has to start from the top, that the leaders have to understand the importance of internal networking, and they have to set the example. So they've got to network with their peers. They've got to find opportunities for the people who report to them to network with people outside the organization. So, they're really creating a culture. And what we found is that there are three big skills that they have to push in this culture change. One is curiosity. And there's, HBR has and LinkedIn have been publishing that curiosity is the new skill for the future. But there's also connection, and there's purpose. So everybody understands curiosity, I think. You're asking questions. You want to know what's going on in other parts of the organization. You're interested. Connection is, getting those interactions with people so that you can learn what's going on in other parts of the organization and build relationships with them. And then purpose is really a focus on, we're all in this together, and we want this enterprise, whatever it is, for-profit, non-profit, whatever, we want this enterprise to be successful, and we're going to work together to get there. So that's that sense of common purpose. And it's those three things that we think create this culture, and it's all wrapped around this internal networking, and it's got to come from the top. Everybody's got a role in it, from the leaders, the managers who report to those leaders and have people reporting to them, and then the individual contributors who've got to build those relationships and those networks.
So just to clarify, the link I have on the screen right now, it's bit.ly/silo busting networking. Does it talk a little bit more about what you just described?
It does. It dives into it. in depth. It shows some of the research behind why internal networking is important. It shows some of the skills at the leader level, the manager level, and the individual contributor level that drive curiosity, connection, and purpose. And it also talks, if you happen to be a learning and development professional, it talks about what you can do to help push that culture, help make that culture change happen in your organization through interactive workshops, whether they be online or some blend, a hybrid kind of thing. There's a lot that the folks in human resources can do to help move that, but that it's all covered in that article. Yes.
So I love what you're talking about, these three components: curiosity, connection, and purpose. Which also reminds me of the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, but
no.
different CCP. But I guess what I'm really asking is, I love what you're talking about, and it reminds me of the problem that companies experience, especially as they start having explosive growth, which is when you're 15 people, you know what everyone's doing, you know what departments everyone's leading, and then suddenly you're 50 people, and suddenly you're 200 people. And I was part of an organization of 300 people that had grown exponentially over 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And while the CEO knew where everyone was and what they were doing, one of the things we discovered was difficult was that other people, especially new people coming in, had a harder time understanding where other people fit in, which speaks exactly to the problem that you have identified and you are talking about, which is, how do you create those semi-permeable boundaries that people can still go and move across and connect with each other to build that connection? I guess my question for you is, how do you advocate that connection be built in these growing organizations?
Well, the larger the organization gets, the more important it is, actually. And those, what you're talking about, that kind of explosive growth, these silos happen naturally because they're the way we organize work. We're human beings. We have to get things organized and put into themes so that we can understand what's going on. So as those boundaries go up, people tend to stay within them just kind of naturally. This is my tribe, so I'm working with these people and I don't need to worry about anything else. So you really need to push them, and leadership and management needs to push them to think outside of their silos and to feel free to ask questions about what's going on in other parts of the organization, to feel free to say, hey, I'm really interested in that initiative over in XYZ department. Is there a way I might be able to get involved in that? So to kind of encourage people to break out of that silo. What most organizations do is they encourage people to stay within those silos, and to behave the way we behave in this particular silo. So it's really a change in the way we're motivating people and what we're encouraging them to do.
So it's funny you say that. I'd read this, or I heard about this rumor about the movie Planet of the Apes. Do you remember the movie?
I do.
Yeah. So
I can't remember much about it, but yeah.
Well, the idea the idea was somewhere there, and I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't seen it in the last 60 years, but I guess spoiler alert. But in the movie, they have these different animals, different monkeys, different apes. All of them are sort of working together, if you will. The interesting part was apparently during the shooting, when they were shooting the movie, the apes would sit differently from the orangutans, would sit differently from everyone else. So to your point, people naturally form silos, people naturally form tribes.
Yeah.
And it's difficult, even when it's an artificial thing like wearing a costume, to break out of that silo. So what are some tips to make those semi-permeable silos? I mean, obviously, one way is curiosity, which is coming from the individual saying, I want to go across. But how can management enable those semi-permeable membranes to say, here's a place you should be looking?
Yeah, that's exactly what management needs to do. as they get to know their people and get to understand that their talents probably are broader than just where they're using them, they need to encourage them to reach out. They can also, another great way to do it is to just organize an invention session. Leaders can do this, where you can invite people from various disciplines to come together and work on a tough problem that the organization is facing and come up with solutions. They're called invention sessions. Great idea. But you can also do just social gatherings where you invite a lot of people from across the organization to come together and just get to know one another in a social setting. So there are lots of things that you can do to encourage people. You just have to let people know this is okay. It's not only okay, I expect you to reach outside this group of people that you work with and get to know people in other parts of the organization and get a bigger picture of what this organization is all about. It's a matter of expectation.
I love it, but I'm wondering, how is the social gathering you just described different from the social gatherings we spoke about, say, 15 minutes ago when we were talking about millennials who want to go to the bar, grab a drink, and that's still a social gathering? Is the fact that it's sanctioned by leadership make it a little bit more okay to network? Or is it the difference between networking versus silo busting? There's a difference there.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. It's sanctioned. So, that's what a work culture is all about. These are the accepted behaviors. So what's really happening is the leaders and the managers are saying, this is the acceptable behavior. We want you to do this. We want you to talk with people in other departments, or talk with your peer who's in another business unit doing the same thing that you're doing. Exchange ideas. Find out what kind of problems they're up against. I'll bet there's some of the same problems that you're facing, and they may have found solutions that you've been looking for. And we actually had this with a pharmaceutical company. We did this via Zoom, but we had a group of people. It was just one division of the organization. But one of the women came back to a later session and said, you know what? I called my counterpart out on the West Coast. We had so much in common, so much to talk about. I learned so much from her, and she actually solved a problem that I've been facing. So that's the kind of atmosphere that you want to create, where people are just reaching out over, maybe it's social, but more than likely it's work. I got a work problem. I can't solve it all by myself. Let me see if anybody else has come up against it and found a solution to it.
I love it. So what I hear you saying is it's about talking and almost connecting over problems. And you called it an invention session, but excuse my language, but isn't that also where you can get into the bitch festing? And I forget how, essentially bitching about your boss or bitching about whatever, or complaining. I should have used complaining or something else. I apologize. But my point being, isn't that rife for setting up complaining sessions? And how do you combat that, where you say, focus on working together, not on the complaining?
I think it takes some structure. So you've got to structure the interaction and the meeting and say, this is what we're here for. Our expectation is that everybody's going to be focused on this problem. And we want to hear if things are going wrong, but we don't want you to come in here just with what's wrong. If there's something wrong, you better come in here with a way to fix it. So you set the expectation that, it's okay to bitch about something, but you better have a pretty good idea of what can be done to fix it and be willing to participate in that fix. So that's really how you shut it down. It's like, we'll listen to you, but we want to hear what you have to say about how we can fix it, how we can make it better. Well, put it back on them.
I mean, that sounds great in principle, but do you think that people would then always default to pay me more money? Like that sounds like an easy thing to latch onto.
I'm sorry, say that again.
So if I'm sure there are loads of complaints, and I'm underpaid, I'm overworked, blah 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 blah. Right. So the automatic fix for all of that is the solution is you pay me more money, this becomes less of a problem. How do you avoid going down that that
Rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Well, if what we find is that when people are engaged and they're networking across the organization and they're working together and they're talking with one another, they are becoming more motivated by what they're doing and the work that they're doing and the organization. They're not really worried about the money so much anymore, because they've got many other satisfiers in their work environment. So that's the key, to create a work environment that people want to be in, have leaders that people want to follow. W.L. Gore has a really interesting way of doing this. They call this their sort of a lattice structure. And anybody can rise to a leadership position, a managerial position, but they need to do it by dint of their own skill. So they've got to be the kind of person that people want to follow. And that there's a lot that goes into that: the ability to communicate, the ability to get people involved, the ability to break down those hierarchical silos. But the people who rise to the surface, the cream of the crop for management in Gore, is the people who can actually get people to follow them. And when you have an environment like that, where there are leaders that people want to follow, you're not going to hear so much about this is a crappy place to work, they don't pay me enough, they don't give me enough time off. That's kind of stuff sort of fades into the background, because people become satisfied with what they're doing and with the organization.
I love it. So let me ask you another question. What does Talent Strategy Partners do in the context of silo busting networking?
So what we do, what Talent Strategy Partners has always done, is understood what the kind of culture that an organization wants to create, and then what are the leadership skills that are required to create that culture. Excuse me. And so we then develop a behavioral skills model that gets built into development, into performance management, into compensation programs. And so we've done the same thing with silo busting networking. We've drilled down to figure out what are those specific behaviors that leaders have to exhibit to create this silo busted culture, if you will. What are the managerial behaviors and what are the individual contributor behaviors? So it's the same sort of thing that we've done all along with Talent Strategy Partners. We've just really focused it on internal networking and breaking down internal silos.
And for those people who are listening to this audio instead of watching it, how can people reach you?
They can reach me through our email. And probably the easiest way is just the quickest is info@TSPHR. That's like Talent Strategy Partners Human Resources.com. Or they could do the old fashioned method and pick up the phone and call me at 215-275-7430.
Wonderful. Again, Pat, thank you so much for coming on. This was amazing. Can't wait to have you back to have more conversations.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much, Darshan.
These conversations are not intended to be legal, regulatory, or clinical advice and may not be right for you. These conversations are intended for educational purposes only. Conversations on this forum do not create an attorney-client relationship.